The text message hit my phone like a sledgehammer to the chest. Your trust fund is gone. Market crashed. You're on your own now. My father's words glowed on the screen, each letter burning into my vision. My hands shook as I dialed the bank immediately. This is Cal Morrison. Please send my father the real account statements. I told the banker, my voice steady despite my racing heart. The ones showing I've been the primary contributor for 5 years, he asked. Exactly. I replied, knowing this single call would destroy everything my father believed about our family's financial foundation. 5 years ago, I was 25 and fresh out of college with my software engineering degree when I discovered the truth that would change everything. My father, Robert, had built Morrison Construction from nothing, turning it into what appeared to be a thriving business in our suburban Colorado town. The company trucks bore his name proudly, and neighbors often commented on his success. But success, I learned, was sometimes just an elaborate performance. I remember that Tuesday evening in March when I stopped by the house to grab some tools from Dad's garage. The front door was unlocked and I could hear muffled voices from his home office. Something in the tone made me pause instead of announcing my arrival. Through the slightly open door, I watched my father hunched over stacks of papers, his normally confident posture crumpled with defeat. $38,000 behind on the mortgage, he whispered into his phone. The subcontractors are threatening to pull out of the Henderson project. I need another $60,000 just to cover payroll this month. His voice cracked in a way I'd never heard before. No, Sarah doesn't know. Neither do the kids. I can't let them see me fail like this. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, each revelation worse than the last. The business that had paid for our comfortable lifestyle, my college education, and Emma's private high school was hemorrhaging money. Equipment loans were 3 months behind. The company truck payments had been missed twice. Even the trust fund my grandfather had established was nearly depleted from emergency withdrawals. That night, I couldn't sleep. I ran calculations in my head, reviewing my own financial situation. My entry-level software position paid $75,000 annually, decent money for someone my age. I lived modestly in a small apartment, drove a used Honda, and had managed to save nearly $40,000. It wasn't enough to solve everything, but it could buy time. The next morning, I made a decision that would define the next 5 years of my life. Without telling anyone, I took out a business loan using my good credit and steady employment as collateral. $50,000 with monthly payments that would stretch my budget to the breaking point. I deposited the money into the family trust fund account, then called my father. Dad, I've been thinking about investing in the business, I said, trying to sound casual. Maybe we could set up some kind of partnership arrangement through the trust fund. I could contribute monthly, and you could use it for operational expenses. The relief in his voice was immediate and heartbreaking. Cal, that would be incredible. Are you sure you can afford it? I wasn't sure at all, but I committed anyway. Let's start with $5,000 a month. I'll transfer it directly into the trust fund, and you can draw from there as needed. For the next 5 years, I lived paycheck to paycheck while my family believed we were financially secure. Every month, exactly $5,000 moved from my account to the trust fund. Sometimes more when emergencies arose. When the company truck broke down, I covered the $8,000 repair bill. When a client delayed payment and Dad couldn't make payroll, I advanced $12,000 to keep the employees happy. The hardest part wasn't the money itself. It was watching my father slowly transform back into the confident man he had always been. Within 6 months, Morrison Construction was bidding on larger projects again. Dad's shoulders straightened, his smile returned, and he began talking about expansion plans. The business genuinely improved under his leadership once the financial pressure lifted, but he never knew the foundation of that improvement came from his son's sacrifice. By the end of year 2, I had contributed over $70,000. The business loan was paid off, but I immediately took out another one to continue the monthly transfers. My own dreams of buying a house, traveling, or building significant savings evaporated month by month, but seeing my family's happiness felt worth the sacrifice. The climactic moment of this deception came during Dad's acceptance speech at the Colorado Contractors Association annual dinner. Morrison Construction had won the Excellence in Small Business Award, recognizing outstanding growth and client satisfaction. I sat in the audience watching my father accept applause for achievements built on my financial foundation. 5 years ago, this company faced challenges that could have destroyed us, Dad said into the microphone, his voice strong and proud. But through careful financial management, strategic planning, and unwavering commitment to quality, we not only survived but thrived. This award represents the American dream in action. The audience erupted in applause. Mom squeezed my hand, tears in her eyes. Emma beamed with pride. And I sat there 29 years old and financially exhausted, realizing that my father had begun believing his own version of events. In his mind, Morrison Construction's turnaround was entirely his achievement. The weight of maintaining the family's financial stability began crushing other areas of my life, particularly my relationship with Jessica Chen, who I had been dating for 3 years. Jessica worked as a marketing coordinator for a Denver advertising firm and came from a family where financial success was measured by visible achievements. Her parents drove luxury cars, lived in an upscale neighborhood, and expected their daughter to marry someone with similar ambitions. At first, Jessica understood my modest lifestyle. She respected my work ethic and appreciated that I wasn't flashy with money. But as our relationship progressed and talk turned to engagement and marriage, her expectations shifted dramatically. She began dropping hints about the kind of wedding she envisioned, the neighborhoods where she wanted to live, and the lifestyle she expected us to build together. "Cal, everyone our age is buying houses," she said one Saturday afternoon as we drove through Highlands Ranch, an affluent suburb south of Denver. "Look at this development. These houses are perfect for young professionals like us. Your trust fund could easily cover a down payment." I gripped the steering wheel tighter, knowing the trust fund she referenced was money I had put there myself and couldn't touch without exposing the entire deception. "I think we should wait a bit longer before making such a big commitment," I replied, trying to sound practical rather than financially trapped. "Wait for what exactly?" Jessica's voice carried a sharpness I was hearing more frequently. "You make good money, your family has money, and I'm ready to start building our future. What are we waiting for?" The conversations grew more frequent and more tense. Jessica couldn't understand why someone from a successful family with a trust fund would choose to live in a cramped apartment and drive a 7-year-old car. She interpreted my frugality as either cheapness or lack of commitment to our relationship. The breaking point arrived during a double date with her college roommate Lauren and Lauren's fiancé David. We met at an expensive steakhouse in Cherry Creek, Denver's most upscale shopping district. David worked in finance, and Lauren was a pharmaceutical sales representative. Both drove BMWs and wore clothes that cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. "So Cal, Jessica tells us you're thinking about proposing," Lauren said, cutting into her $45 ribeye. "Have you picked out a ring yet?" Jessica's eyes lit up expectantly. We had discussed engagement in general terms, but I had been delaying any specific plans because a decent ring would require months of saving, and months of saving meant months of not contributing to the trust fund. "We're taking our time with the decision," I said carefully. "Marriage is a big step." David laughed and slapped my shoulder. "Come on, man. When you know, you know." I proposed to Lauren 6 months after we started dating. Got her a 2-carat princess cut from Tiffany. Cost me $22,000, but she's worth every penny. Lauren extended her left hand, and the diamond caught the restaurant's lighting like a miniature disco ball. Jessica's gaze moved from the ring to my face, her expression shifting from excitement to disappointment. "$22,000, Jessica repeated quietly. "That's beautiful, Lauren." I felt trapped between honesty and maintaining the facade that kept my family stable. If I explained my real financial situation, Jessica would want to know why someone with a trust fund lived paycheck to paycheck. Any investigation would expose my father's business problems and the deception I had worked 5 years to maintain. Cal believes in being practical about major purchases. Jessica said her tone suggesting this practicality was a character flaw rather than necessity. The evening deteriorated from there. Jessica became increasingly withdrawn, comparing our relationship unfavorably to Lauren and David's obvious affluence. When David offered to cover the entire dinner bill, since we're celebrating their engagement planning, Jessica accepted graciously while I felt the humiliation of being unable to pay for my own girlfriend's meal. The final confrontation happened 2 weeks later at my parents' Sunday dinner, a weekly tradition Mom had maintained for as long as I could remember. Jessica had been distant since the double date, responding to texts with single words and declining my invitations to spend time together. I hoped the familiar comfort of family dinner might restore some normalcy to our relationship. Emma was home from her junior year at University of Colorado, full of stories about her pre-med courses and volunteer work at the campus medical center. Dad dominated the conversation with updates about Morrison Construction's latest projects, including a contract to build a new office complex that would be the company's largest job to date. The profit margin on this project could fund some major equipment upgrades. Dad said, carving the roast Mom had spent all afternoon preparing. Maybe even allow us to expand into commercial plumbing. Cal, you should consider coming into the business full-time once this project wraps up. Your software skills could really modernize our operations. I appreciate the offer, Dad, but I'm happy with my current position, I replied, knowing that leaving my salary job would immediately collapse the financial structure, keeping Morrison Construction afloat. Jessica had been unusually quiet throughout dinner, picking at her food and offering only polite responses when directly addressed. Finally, during dessert, she stood abruptly and faced the entire table. "I can't do this anymore," she announced, her voice shaking with emotion. "Cal, I've been waiting for 3 years for you to show some real ambition, some commitment to building a life together. Your family has money, you have opportunities, but you're content living like a college student forever." The dining room fell silent except for the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Mom's fork clinked against her plate as she set it down carefully. Emma stared with wide eyes. Dad's expression shifted from confusion to concern. "Jessica, maybe we should discuss this privately," I said, standing and reaching for her arm. She pulled away sharply. "No, I think your family should hear this. They should know that their son, who supposedly has access to family money and business opportunities, can't even commit to buying me an engagement ring or moving out of that tiny apartment." The words hit like physical blows. Jessica had no way of knowing that every dollar of family money she referenced came from my own sacrifices, that the business opportunities Dad mentioned would disappear the moment I stopped my monthly contributions. Dad's face darkened with what I recognized as his protective anger. "Young lady, I don't appreciate your tone or your implications about my son's character." "Your son's character?" Jessica laughed bitterly. "Do you know he's been putting off our engagement for 8 months because he claims he can't afford a decent ring? He drives a car older than some of his co-workers' kids and lives in an apartment with a bathroom so small you can touch both walls while sitting on the toilet." "Cal has always been practical with money," Mom interjected gently. "That's a positive quality in a young man. Practical." Jessica's voice rose higher. "He's cheap and unmotivated. He has no vision for the future, no desire to build anything meaningful. I deserve someone who wants to create a real life with me, not someone who's satisfied with mediocrity." Emma looked back and forth between Jessica and me, confusion clear on her face. "Cal, I don't understand. Why would money be a problem?" The question hung in the air like smoke. 3 sets of family eyes focused on me, waiting for an explanation I couldn't provide without revealing everything. Jessica crossed her arms, her stance suggesting this was my opportunity to prove her wrong by accessing the family wealth she believed existed. Dad leaned forward, his businessman's instincts engaging. Cal, if you need financial help with an engagement ring or a house down payment, we can certainly work something out through the family trust. Your grandfather established that fund specifically for major life events. The irony was overwhelming. Dad was offering to lend me money from an account I had been funding for 5 years. Money that was technically mine, but that I couldn't access without destroying the carefully constructed financial stability his business required. I don't need help from the trust fund, I said quietly. Jessica and I simply have different timelines for major commitments. Jessica's face flushed red. Different timelines, Cal? I'm 30 years old. I want to be married to own a home to start planning for children. I can't wait indefinitely for you to decide you're ready for an adult life. She turned to address my parents directly. I'm sorry for disrupting your family dinner, but I needed you to understand why I can't continue this relationship. Your son is a good man, but he lacks the drive and ambition I need in a partner. With that declaration, Jessica walked out, leaving behind the engagement expectations, the wedding dreams, and 3 years of shared history. The front door closing echoed through the house like a gunshot. Dad was the first to break the stunned silence. Son, I had no idea you were facing financial pressure. The business has been doing well, and the trust fund has healthy balances. If you're worried about accessing family money for personal use, we should have discussed this months ago. His words carried genuine concern, but also an undertone of disappointment that stung worse than Jessica's public rejection. In Dad's mind, I had allowed pride or stubbornness to cost me a relationship when family resources were available to prevent exactly this outcome. 6 months after Jessica's departure, life had settled into a new routine of quiet loneliness and financial strain. I threw myself into work, picking up freelance programming projects in the evenings to supplement my income. The extra money helped offset the increasing demands on the trust fund as Dad's business continued expanding. What I didn't anticipate was how quickly a single phone call could shatter even this fragile stability. Cal, Emma's voice bubbled with excitement through my cell phone as I sat in my apartment eating another dinner of pasta and generic tomato sauce. You're not going to believe this. I got in where I asked, though the joy in her voice already told me everything I needed to know. Johns Hopkins' full acceptance to their medical program. I'm going to be a doctor. My heart swelled with pride for my little sister, even as my stomach dropped with the financial implications. Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine was among the most prestigious and expensive medical schools in the country. 4 years of tuition alone would cost over $200,000, not including living expenses, books, and fees. Emma, that's incredible. I'm so proud of you, I said, and meant every word. My sister had worked tirelessly through undergraduate school, maintaining a 4.0 GPA while volunteering at hospitals and conducting research. She deserved every opportunity her intelligence and dedication could earn. I have to call Mom and Dad right now, she continued breathlessly. This is everything I've worked for since I was 12 years old and decided I wanted to help people get better. After Emma hung up, I sat staring at my laptop screen trying to calculate numbers that refused to add up favorably. Medical school required a $50,000 deposit within 60 days of acceptance just to secure Emma's spot in the incoming class. The deposit was non-refundable and separate from tuition payments that would begin in August. My own financial situation had grown increasingly precarious over the past 6 months. Without Jessica's occasional contributions to dinners and entertainment, every dollar went toward either basic living expenses or the monthly trust fund transfer. I had no savings left, no available credit, and no legitimate way to explain to Emma or my parents why someone with supposed access to family money couldn't help fund this life-changing opportunity. 2 days later, Dad called a family meeting to discuss Emma's medical school expenses. We gathered in the living room where Emma had announced her acceptance, but the mood was far more somber than celebratory. I've been reviewing our finances and researching education loan options. Dad began consulting a legal pad covered with his handwriting. Medical school costs have increased significantly since I looked into this years ago. Mom sat beside Emma on the couch, holding her daughter's hand in a gesture of support that made my chest tight with emotion. We'll find a way, sweetheart. This is your dream, and dreams are worth any sacrifice. Dad's confidence wavered slightly as he continued. The total cost over 4 years will be approximately $300,000. The federal loan programs will cover about 2/3 of that amount, but we need to bridge the remaining gap through private loans or family resources. What about the trust fund? Emma asked innocently. Grandpa always said it was there for education and major life events. I watched Dad's face, carefully looking for any sign he understood the trust fund's real source. His expression remained genuinely optimistic, suggesting he still believed the account contained family wealth rather than his son's monthly contributions. The trust fund should definitely be part of the solution, Dad agreed. I'll need to review the current balance and withdrawal procedures with the bank. There might be some paperwork requirements since it's been several years since we've accessed the principal. My heart hammered against my ribs. Dad's plan to review the balance would immediately expose that the trust fund contained money I had been depositing monthly. Worse, those deposits were documented with clear source information showing transfers from my personal checking account. That evening, I lay awake running impossible calculations. Even if I stopped contributing to the trust fund immediately, the existing balance was insufficient to cover Emma's medical school gap. But stopping contributions would leave Morrison Construction unable to meet its financial obligations within 3 months. Dad's business success was still entirely dependent on the monthly cash infusion I provided. I needed $50,000 quickly and quietly, with no family involvement or discovery. My regular salary was already stretched beyond sustainability. Freelance work would take months to generate that kind of income. The only option left was liquidating my retirement accounts, accepting the tax penalties, and converting my future security into Emma's present opportunity. The decision tortured me for 2 weeks. Emptying my 401k and individual retirement account would provide approximately $55,000 after taxes and penalties. It represented 5 years of careful saving and employer matching money I had planned to use for my own home down payment someday. But Emma's medical school acceptance was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that couldn't be delayed or postponed. On a rainy Thursday morning, I called my financial advisor and authorized the complete liquidation of my retirement savings. The process would take 5 business days with funds available the following Wednesday. I felt simultaneously relieved and terrified, knowing I was trading my own financial future for Emma's educational dreams. What I discovered next changed everything I thought I understood about my father's situation. I'd driven to the construction office to drop off some software updates I had created for their project management system. Dad wasn't there, but I could hear his voice carrying from the conference room where he was meeting with someone. The conversation was clearly stressful, with Dad's tone alternating between pleading and desperation. Margaret, I understand your concerns about the company's financial history, he was saying, but the turnaround over the past 5 years speaks for itself. Morrison Construction is stronger now than it's ever been. I froze outside the conference room, recognizing the implications of what I was overhearing. Dad was meeting with an investor trying to secure funding for Emma's education by leveraging the business success that my money had created. The numbers are impressive, Robert, a woman's voice replied. Revenue growth of 40% consistent profitability, excellent client retention. My question is about sustainability. What guarantees do I have that this performance will continue? The financial strategies that saved this company 5 years ago are still in place. Dad responded with growing confidence. We have reliable cash flow, experienced leadership, and a proven track record of growth in challenging market conditions. My blood ran cold as I realized Dad was preparing to present my financial contributions as evidence of business acumen, potentially securing loans or investment based on achievements that were actually my personal sacrifices. The meeting continued for another hour, with Dad providing detailed financial projections and growth plans built entirely on his assumption that monthly trust fund contributions would continue indefinitely. He was promising investor returns based on money I could no longer afford to provide, especially after emptying my retirement accounts for Emma's school deposit. When Margaret Thornton finally emerged from the conference room, I got my first look at the woman whose investment Dad was courting. She was probably 55 with silver hair and the kind of confident posture that suggested significant business experience. Her handshake with Dad looked promising, and her final words confirmed my worst fears. "I'll have my financial team review your documentation, Robert. If everything checks out, we could potentially structure a partnership that provides both Emma's education funding and working capital for business expansion." Dad walked her to the parking lot, his entire demeanor radiating optimism and relief. He had found what he believed was the perfect solution: an investor who would fund Emma's dreams while expanding Morrison Construction's capabilities. But the solution was built on a foundation of lies that I alone understood. Dad was promising future performance based on my continued financial support that was becoming literally impossible to maintain. When the investor realized the monthly cash infusions were ending, both the partnership and the business expansion would collapse spectacularly. I sat in my car for 20 minutes after they left, staring at the Morrison Construction sign and understanding that my father was about to make promises he couldn't keep based on resources he didn't actually control. Emma's medical school dreams had become entangled with business expansion plans that would fail the moment anyone examined the trust fund's real source. The climactic realization hit me like ice water. Dad wasn't just unaware of my contributions. He was actively leveraging them to secure additional financial commitments that would destroy both the business and our family relationships when the truth finally emerged. Margaret Thornton represented the kind of opportunity Dad had dreamed about for 20 years. Her investment firm, Thornton Capital Partners, specialized in funding growth-stage construction companies throughout the Rocky Mountain region. She had the resources and connections to transform Morrison Construction from a local contractor into a regional powerhouse, assuming the financial foundation was as solid as Dad believed. I couldn't stop thinking about their meeting and the dangerous promises Dad was making. 2 days later, my curiosity and growing panic drove me to research Margaret's background and investment criteria. Her firm's website showcased an impressive portfolio of construction companies they had funded and grown over the past decade. The testimonials spoke of dramatic revenue increases, market expansion, and long-term partnerships built on mutual trust and transparency. The transparency requirement worried me most. Margaret's due diligence process involved comprehensive financial audits, background checks on key personnel, and detailed analysis of cash flow patterns. Any serious investigation would immediately reveal that Morrison Construction's stability depended entirely on mysterious monthly deposits from an external source. My fears crystallized when Dad called me Friday evening, his voice bright with excitement and nervous energy. "Cal, I need to ask you for a favor," he began. "Margaret Thornton wants to schedule a follow-up meeting next week, and she's specifically interested in meeting the financial mind behind our company's turnaround strategy." My throat tightened. "What do you mean?" "She's done some preliminary research on our bank records and noticed the pattern of strategic cash infusions that saved us 5 years ago. She wants to meet whoever developed that financial recovery plan and potentially offer them a position in her investment firm." The irony was almost overwhelming. Margaret wanted to meet the person responsible for Morrison Construction's success, having no idea that person was Dad's own son who had sacrificed his personal financial security to maintain the illusion of business competence. "Who are you planning to present as this financial strategist?" I asked carefully. Dad's pause lasted several seconds too long. "Well, that's the complicated part. I may have implied that we work with an external financial consultant who prefers to maintain confidentiality due to proprietary strategies. You created a fictional consultant?" "Not fictional exactly," Dad said defensively. "More like protecting intellectual property. The important thing is that Margaret is impressed with our results and ready to move forward with a significant investment partnership." I felt the walls closing in from every direction. Dad's fictional consultant would need to either appear for meetings or risk exposing the entire deception. But the real consultant was his own son, whose contributions were about to end due to financial exhaustion and whose retirement savings were already committed to Emma's medical school deposit. "How much investment is she considering?" I asked. "Potentially $200,000 in immediate working capital, plus a 5-year growth plan that could provide up to $1 million in expansion funding. Cal, this could set our family up for generations." The numbers made my stomach lurch. Dad was negotiating commitments that assumed Morrison Construction's mysterious cash flow would continue indefinitely. When Margaret's financial team discovered the monthly deposits came from an external individual rather than business operations, the entire partnership would collapse in accusations of fraud and misrepresentation. I made a decision that terrified me, but seemed like the only option left. "Dad, I'd like to attend this meeting. Maybe I can help explain our financial strategies from a technical perspective." "That's a great idea. Margaret would appreciate having our software expert there to discuss how technology improvements contributed to our efficiency gains." Dad had no idea he was inviting the very person whose secret contributions had created the success he was trying to leverage. The meeting was scheduled for Tuesday afternoon at Margaret's downtown Denver office, giving me 4 days to prepare for what might be the most important conversation of my life. Margaret's office occupied the 20th floor of a glass tower in Denver's financial district, with panoramic views of the Rocky Mountains and the kind of understated luxury that suggested serious money. The conference room where we met could have hosted board meetings for companies 10 times Morrison Construction's size. "Robert, I'm glad you brought your technical advisor," Margaret said, shaking my hand with a firm grip that conveyed both warmth and assessment. "I'm particularly interested in understanding how operational improvements contributed to your financial turnaround." I chose my words carefully, describing legitimate software upgrades and process improvements that had indeed helped Morrison Construction operate more efficiently. But I watched Margaret's expressions, noting when her questions shifted from operational details to financial specifics. "The pattern that most interests me," she said, consulting a tablet loaded with financial charts, "is the consistency of your cash flow improvements. Most construction companies experience seasonal fluctuations in project-based revenue cycles. Your company shows remarkably stable monthly performance indicators." Dad beamed with pride, interpreting her observation as validation of his management skills. "We've worked hard to diversify our client base and maintain consistent project pipelines." Margaret nodded approvingly, then turned her attention directly to me. "Cal, your father mentioned that software improvements contributed to operational efficiency. Can you walk me through how technology investments generated measurable financial returns?" This was dangerous territory. Any specific claims about technology spending would be easily verified against actual company expenses, revealing that Morrison Construction had made minimal technology investments despite significant operational improvements. Third, the most impactful changes were actually process improvements rather than major technology purchases, I said honestly. Better project scheduling improved client communication and more accurate cost estimation. Most of these improvements required training and discipline rather than significant financial investment. Margaret made notes on her tablet, occasionally glancing between Dad and me with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. Her questions grew more specific, probing details about cash flow, timing, seasonal adjustments, and contingency planning. Robert, I'd like to understand your contingency planning for potential market downturns or major client losses. What financial reserves does Morrison Construction maintain for weathering difficult periods? Dad's confidence faltered slightly. We maintain appropriate reserves through our trust fund arrangements and careful cash flow management. Trust fund arrangements. Margaret's eyebrows raised with interest. Can you elaborate on how family trusts integrate with business operations? I felt sweat building along my collar as Dad enthusiastically described the trust fund that I had been funding for 5 years. His explanation made it sound like a sophisticated financial instrument rather than his son's monthly sacrifice disguised as family wealth. The trust fund provides operational stability during challenging periods, Dad continued. It's been particularly valuable for bridging gaps between major project payments and maintaining consistent payroll. Margaret's questions became increasingly focused on the trust fund's structure and management. Who oversees the trust fund's investment strategy? How are withdrawal decisions made? What documentation exists regarding contribution sources and distribution policies? Each question drove us deeper into territory where Dad's assumptions about family wealth would collide with the reality of my personal contributions. I could see Margaret's analytical mind working through inconsistencies in Dad's explanations, particularly the trust fund's apparently unlimited capacity to support business operations. The climactic moment arrived when Margaret leaned forward with the kind of direct question that would either expose everything or force me to participate actively in Dad's deception. I'd like to meet with whoever manages this trust fund arrangement. Given its central role in your business stability, my due diligence process requires understanding its structure and sustainability. When could we schedule a meeting with your trust fund administrator? Dad looked at me with an expression that mixed hope and panic. In his mind, I was the family's technical expert, who might be able to navigate Margaret's requirements without exposing his limited understanding of our actual financial situation. Margaret, the trust fund management involves some confidentiality considerations, I said carefully. But I think we could arrange appropriate documentation and review processes to meet your requirements. Margaret smiled with the kind of professional warmth that suggested she had heard similar responses before. Excellent. I'll have my financial team prepare a list of specific documents and interviews they'll need to complete the investment evaluation. Should we plan on next Friday for the comprehensive review? Dad agreed enthusiastically, his relief evident, as Margaret outlined the potential partnership structure and investment timeline. But I sat there calculating how many days remained before his fictional success story would collide with the mathematical reality of bank records, tax documents, and source verification requirements. Margaret walked us to the elevator, shaking hands and expressing optimism about the potential partnership. As the elevator descended 20 floors to street level, Dad's excitement filled the small space. Cal, this is incredible. Margaret sees the same potential in Morrison Construction that I've always known was there. This partnership could change everything for our family. I nodded and smiled, understanding that Dad's dreams were about to become nightmares, when Margaret's financial team discovered that Morrison Construction's stability was an elaborate illusion maintained by his son's personal sacrifice. The investigation would begin Monday morning, giving me exactly 4 business days to decide whether to expose the truth myself or wait for Margaret's auditors to uncover it during their comprehensive review. The weekend between Margaret's meeting and her Monday morning financial investigation felt like waiting for a controlled demolition. I knew exactly when the explosion would occur and approximately how much damage it would cause, but I was powerless to prevent it or adequately warn the people who would be hurt most. Sunday dinner at my parents' house carried a surreal quality of normalcy, masking impending catastrophe. Emma bubbled with excitement about her medical school preparations, having received her enrollment package from Johns Hopkins. Mom displayed maternal pride mixed with anxiety about the massive financial commitment. Dad radiated confidence about Margaret's investment partnership, describing expansion plans and equipment purchases with the enthusiasm of someone whose dreams were finally within reach. I sat at the familiar dining room table picking at Mom's pot roast and trying to calculate exactly how many hours remained before Margaret's team would discover that Morrison Construction's financial foundation was built on lies. My retirement account liquidation had cleared the previous Friday, providing Emma's $50,000 deposit, but that temporary solution had only delayed the inevitable reckoning. After dinner, I followed Dad to his home office under the pretense of discussing some software updates for the company's project management system. The office walls displayed 20 years of Morrison Construction achievements, building permits for major projects, Chamber of Commerce awards, photos of Dad shaking hands with satisfied clients. Every accomplishment represented genuine hard work and business skill, making the underlying deception even more heartbreaking. Dad, we need to talk about Margaret's financial review. I began closing the office door behind me. He looked up from his desk where architectural plans for a new office complex were spread across the surface. What kind of concerns do you have? Margaret seemed very positive about the partnership potential. I took a deep breath, knowing this conversation would destroy his confidence and possibly our relationship. The financial review is going to reveal some information about the trust fund that you're not expecting. Dad's expression shifted from casual interest to focused attention. What kind of information? Margaret's team is going to discover that the monthly deposits supporting Morrison Construction didn't come from Grandpa's trust fund or family investments. They came from my personal bank account. For 5 years, I've been transferring $5,000 every month from my salary to keep this business afloat. The words hung in the air like smoke from an explosion. Dad's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and growing comprehension as the implications sank in. "That's impossible," he said quietly. "The trust fund has family money. Your grandfather established it specifically for situations like this. Grandpa's original trust fund was depleted 6 years ago when you were facing foreclosure on the house. I discovered the financial crisis and decided to help without telling anyone. Every month since then, I've been funding what you believed was family wealth." Dad stood slowly, his hands gripping the edge of the desk. "Cal, if this is some kind of joke, it's not funny. Morrison Construction's success over the past 5 years is real. The profits are real. The business growth is real." "The business growth is absolutely real," I agreed. "You've done incredible work managing projects, building client relationships, and developing the company's reputation. But the financial foundation that allowed that growth came from my personal sacrifice, not family resources." Dad's face flushed red as anger replaced confusion. "Why would you do something like that without discussing it with me? Why would you let me believe—" "Because you needed to believe it," I interrupted. "You needed the confidence to bid on larger projects, to take calculated risks, to rebuild your reputation after the financial crisis. If you had known the money came from your 25-year-old son's entry-level salary, it would have destroyed your pride and your ability to lead the company." The explanation only increased Dad's agitation. He began pacing behind his desk, occasionally stopping to stare at me with an expression that mixed betrayal and humiliation. "So for 5 years, I've been accepting charity for my own child. Everything I've rebuilt, every success I've celebrated, was actually funded by my son's pity." "It wasn't pity, Dad. It was love and respect for what you were trying to accomplish." "Love?" Dad's voice rose to a shout. "You let me stand in front of the Contractors Association and accept an award for achievements that were actually yours. You let me promise Margaret Thornton returns on investment that depend on your continued financial support. The accusation stung because it was partially true. I had enabled Dad's self-deception, allowing him to build his identity around success that was artificially supported. But the alternative had been watching him lose everything he had worked to build. I never intended for it to go this far," I said. I thought the business would become genuinely profitable within a couple of years, and I could gradually reduce my contributions without anyone noticing. But it didn't work out that way, did it? Dad's pacing intensified. Instead, you trapped yourself into permanent financial support while I promised expansion plans and partnership commitments based on resources that don't actually exist. Before I could respond, the office door opened and Mom appeared with her concerned expression that appeared whenever voices were raised in her house. "What's going on in here?" We could hear shouting from the kitchen. Dad and I stared at each other, both realizing that Mom's innocent question was about to force the entire truth into the open. Behind Mom, I could see Emma hovering in the hallway, her face reflecting worry about the obvious family conflict. "Sarah, we need to have a family meeting," Dad said, his voice tight with controlled emotion. "There are some financial matters we need to discuss immediately." 5 minutes later, our family gathered in the living room with the kind of tense formality usually reserved for funerals or divorce announcements. Mom and Emma sat together on the couch, their expressions shifting between confusion and growing alarm. Dad remained standing, positioned like a prosecutor, preparing to present evidence of betrayal. "Cal has just informed me that Morrison Construction's financial stability for the past 5 years has been dependent on his personal salary contributions," Dad announced without preamble. "The trust fund we believed supported our family, and business was actually money Cal transferred from his own bank account." Mom's face went pale. "Cal, is this true?" I nodded, feeling simultaneously relieved and terrified to have the secret finally exposed. "I discovered Dad was facing foreclosure and business failure 5 years ago. I decided to help without telling anyone." Emma's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "The $50,000 for my medical school deposit, did that come from your personal money too?" "I liquidated my retirement savings to cover your enrollment fee," I admitted. The revelation hit Emma like a physical blow. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with what I realized were tears of guilt and gratitude. Mom looked back and forth between Dad and me, her expression cycling through shock, anger, and hurt. "Robert, you knew our family was facing foreclosure and didn't tell me." "I was trying to protect everyone," Dad said defensively. "I thought I could solve the problems without involving the family in business difficulties." Protect everyone. Mom's voice carried a sharp edge I had rarely heard. "You let our son sacrifice his financial future to maintain a lie that I was living unknowingly. You let me spend money on household improvements and family vacations while Cal was supporting us through his own savings." The family meeting escalated into the most painful conversation of my life. 5 years of hidden sacrifices, deceptive explanations, and accumulated resentments poured out in accusations and tearful revelations. Emma learned that her private high school tuition had been supplemented by my contributions. Mom discovered that family vacations and household upgrades had been indirectly funded by my budget constraints. Dad's anger shifted between targeting me for enabling his deception and targeting himself for accepting help he hadn't recognized. "Cal, you had no right to make this decision for our family. You robbed me of the chance to address our problems honestly and find real solutions." "The real solutions would have resulted in losing the house and closing the business," I replied. I was 25 years old and watching my father's life work collapse. I made the best decision I could with the information I had. "But it wasn't sustainable," Dad shouted. "You've been living paycheck to paycheck for 5 years, while I promised expansion plans to investors based on financial resources that depend entirely on your continued sacrifice. What happens when you can't afford to keep supporting us? What happens when Margaret's team discovers the truth tomorrow morning?" The question hung in the air because none of us had an answer. Margaret's financial investigation would expose everything within 48 hours, destroying both the investment partnership and Dad's reputation in the construction industry. The business expansion plans would collapse, potentially taking Morrison Construction back to the same financial crisis that had started this entire deception. Emma lifted her head from her hands, her face streaked with tears. I need to withdraw from medical school. I can't let Cal destroy his financial future for my dreams. Absolutely not, I said firmly. You earned that acceptance through your own merit and hard work. Your education is an investment in your future that no one should have the right to take away. But you've already sacrificed your retirement savings, she protested. How can I accept that kind of gift when you can't even afford to get married or buy a house? The reference to my failed relationship with Jessica added another layer of pain to an already overwhelming conversation. Everything I had postponed or sacrificed in my personal life was now exposed as connected to the family's financial deception. The climactic moment arrived when Dad grabbed his chest and staggered backward, his face suddenly gray and his breathing shallow and rapid. The family conflict had triggered what appeared to be a heart attack, transforming our emotional crisis into a potential medical emergency. Call 911, Mom shouted, rushing to support Dad as he collapsed into his office chair. Emma immediately shifted into her pre-med training, checking Dad's pulse and breathing, while I dialed emergency services. The next 20 minutes blurred together in a chaos of paramedics' medical questions, and the terrifying possibility that our family argument had caused Dad's heart to fail under the stress of revealed deceptions. As the ambulance pulled away with Dad inside and Mom accompanying him to the hospital, Emma and I stood in the driveway facing the reality that our family's financial crisis had become a medical emergency with potentially life-threatening consequences. Denver Presbyterian Hospital's emergency waiting room became our temporary headquarters for what felt like the longest night of our lives. Emma and I sat in uncomfortable plastic chairs drinking bad coffee and watching the clock crawl toward morning, while doctors evaluated Dad's condition. The initial diagnosis was stress-induced cardiac arrhythmia rather than a full heart attack, but he was being held for observation and additional testing. Mom emerged from the emergency bay around 2 a.m, her face exhausted but relieved. He's stable. The cardiologist says it was an anxiety attack that triggered irregular heartbeat. They want to keep him overnight for monitoring, but there's no permanent heart damage. Emma hugged Mom tightly, and I felt a weight lift from my chest that I hadn't realized was there. The fear of having caused Dad's death through family conflict had been almost unbearable. Can we see him? I asked. He's sleeping now, but visiting hours start at 8. The doctor recommended rest for everyone. Mom paused, studying my face with the kind of maternal perception that saw through years of careful deception. Cal, we need to finish our conversation from earlier. There are things about our family finances that I should have questioned years ago. We drove home in convoy, Emma riding with Mom while I followed in my own car. The familiar suburban streets looked different in the pre-dawn darkness, as if the night's revelations had changed my perspective on everything I thought I understood about my life. Back at the house, we reconvened in the living room where the evening's crisis had begun. But the atmosphere had shifted from anger and accusation to exhausted honesty and shared vulnerability. Cal, I owe you an apology. Mom began settling into her favorite armchair with the kind of weariness that went beyond physical fatigue. I should have noticed that our family's spending didn't align with Robert's actual business income. I chose not to ask difficult questions because I preferred the comfort of financial security over the truth about how we were affording that security. Her admission surprised me. Throughout the 5 years of deception, I had assumed Mom was completely unaware of the family's financial struggles. You knew something was wrong, I asked. I suspected, she corrected. When your father was supposedly struggling 5 years ago, he was too stressed for someone whose business was actually profitable. When the stress suddenly disappeared, the relief seemed disproportionate to normal business fluctuations. Emma curled up on the couch, her medical school acceptance letter visible on the coffee table where she had left it earlier in the evening. Mom, if you suspected problems, why didn't you ask questions? Because I was afraid of the answers, Mom said honestly. Your father's pride is both his greatest strength and his most dangerous weakness. I was terrified that pushing for financial transparency would force him to admit failure, and I wasn't sure he could survive that kind of blow to his self-image. The conversation continued until sunrise, with each family member revealing assumptions and fears that had shaped 5 years of careful deception. Mom admitted she had wondered why I lived so modestly despite supposedly having access to family money. Emma confessed she had never understood why I seemed so reluctant to spend money on normal young adult activities like vacations or entertainment. I thought you were just extremely responsible with money, Emma said. It never occurred to me that you were actually supporting our entire family through your own income. The most painful revelation came when Mom described her growing awareness of the financial sacrifices I was making. Cal, I noticed you stopped buying new clothes, that you drove the same car for years longer than necessary, that you never seemed to have money for social activities. I told myself you were being responsible and saving for your future. But deep down I suspected you were struggling more than you admitted. Her words hit me harder than Dad's anger had the previous evening. I had thought I was successfully hiding the impact of my financial contributions, but Mom had been watching her son sacrifice his quality of life and chosen not to intervene because addressing the problem would require acknowledging the deception that made her own comfortable lifestyle possible. Around 7 in the morning, Emma made a decision that surprised all of us. I'm deferring medical school for 1 year, she announced with quiet determination. I've already confirmed that Johns Hopkins allows deferrals for financial or family reasons. I'm going to spend the next year working full-time and contributing to my own education costs. Emma, you don't need to do that, I protested. Your education is too important to delay. My education will be more meaningful if I contribute to funding it myself, she replied. Cal, you've already given me the opportunity by covering the deposit. I can earn at least $30,000 over the next year, and that combined with additional financial aid applications will reduce the family's burden significantly. Mom nodded approvingly. Emma, I think that's a very mature decision, and I've made a decision of my own. I'm going back to work. This announcement shocked both Emma and me. Mom had been a stay-at-home parent since Emma was born 22 years ago, occasionally volunteering for church activities and community organizations, but never holding paid employment. Mom, you haven't worked outside the home in decades, I said. Are you sure you want to take on that stress? I need to take on that stress, she corrected. I've been living on the financial contributions of my son for 5 years without contributing anything meaningful to our family's economic stability. It's time for me to rejoin the workforce and help support the household I've been enjoying without earning. She explained that she had already researched administrative positions at local companies and felt confident about her ability to secure employment that would contribute $15,000 to $20,000 annually to the family budget. At 8:30, we returned to the hospital to visit Dad and continue the previous night's interrupted conversation. He looked smaller and older in the hospital bed connected to monitoring equipment that beeped softly in the background. But his color had improved and his breathing was steady and normal. How are you feeling? Emma asked, taking his hand gently. Like an old fool who nearly killed himself over problems that aren't actually life-threatening, Dad replied with weak humor. The cardiologist spent an hour explaining how stress and anxiety can mimic heart attack symptoms. Apparently, I gave myself a panic attack so severe it required medical intervention. I pulled a chair closer to the hospital bed, knowing we needed to address the practical implications of the previous night's revelations. Dad Margaret's financial team will begin their investigation this morning. We need to decide how to handle their discovery that the trust fund was actually funded through my personal contributions. Dad was quiet for several moments, staring at the ceiling tiles with an expression of resignation and growing resolve. Cal, I've been lying awake for hours thinking about this situation. I created this mess through pride and poor financial management 5 years ago. You solved it through generosity and self-sacrifice. Now I need to take responsibility for cleaning it up regardless of the consequences to my ego or reputation. His words carried a sincerity and humility I had never heard from him before. "What are you thinking?" I asked. "I'm thinking I need to call Margaret this morning and explain the real situation before her team discovers it through their investigation. I need to withdraw from the investment partnership and work on rebuilding Morrison Construction's finances through legitimate means." Emma squeezed his hand encouragingly. "Dad, that takes a lot of courage." "It's not courage," Dad corrected. "It's long overdue honesty. Cal, I owe you an apology that goes far beyond words. You've carried a burden for 5 years that should never have been your responsibility. Worse, I built my self-respect and business reputation on your sacrifice while remaining completely unaware of the cost you were paying." The apology meant more to me than he could possibly understand. For 5 years, I had wondered whether my decision to help had been right or wrong, whether I had helped or enabled, whether my sacrifice had truly benefited our family or simply postponed necessary reckonings. "Dad, I need to tell you something else," I said. "Morrison Construction really is successful now, but in ways you don't realize. The business skills you've developed over the past 5 years, the client relationships you've built, the reputation you've earned, those achievements are genuine and sustainable. The monthly cash infusions gave you breathing room to develop those strengths, but the strengths themselves belong to you." Dad's eyes filled with tears as he processed this perspective on his accomplishments. "Do you really believe that—" "I've watched you transform from a struggling small business owner into a respected contractor who delivers quality work on schedule and within budget. Your success isn't artificial, Dad. It's real and it's yours." The conversation was interrupted by a knock on the hospital room door. We expected to see a nurse or doctor, but instead Margaret Thornton entered with a small tablet computer and an expression of professional concern mixed with curiosity. "Robert, I heard about your hospitalization and wanted to check on your condition before beginning our financial review," she said, then noticed the family gathering around the hospital bed. "I hope I'm not intruding on private time." Dad looked at me, then at Mom and Emma, drawing strength from our presence, before making the decision that would define his character for the rest of his life. "Margaret, actually, this is perfect timing. I need to have an honest conversation with you about Morrison Construction's financial history before you waste time investigating information that isn't what it appears to be." Margaret raised an eyebrow and pulled up a chair, clearly recognizing that she was about to receive significant information. "I'm listening, Robert." Dad took a deep breath, glanced once more at our family, and began telling the truth that would either destroy or liberate Morrison Construction's future. The monthly cash flow that stabilized my business over the past 5 years didn't come from family trust funds or sophisticated financial management. It came from my son, Cal, who has been transferring $5,000 every month from his personal salary to keep Morrison Construction solvent. Margaret's expression shifted from surprise to intense focus as Dad explained the entire deception. The near foreclosure 5 years ago, my decision to intervene financially, his gradual assumption that the money represented family wealth, and the investment partnership he had pursued based on fundamentally false financial assumptions. When Dad finished his explanation, Margaret was quiet for nearly 2 minutes, occasionally making notes on her tablet and studying each family member's face. "Cal," she finally said, turning her attention to me, "you're the individual responsible for Morrison Construction's financial turnaround. I provided the cash flow that allowed Dad to rebuild the business," I replied carefully. "But the actual business improvements, client relationships, and operational efficiency gains were entirely his achievements." Margaret nodded slowly, her analytical mind clearly processing the implications of what she had learned. "Robert, I appreciate your honesty, especially given the potential consequences for our partnership discussions. However, I'm actually more interested in this situation than I was in the original investment proposal." Her response surprised all of us. "What do you mean?" Dad asked. Margaret smiled with genuine warmth. "I mean, I'd like to offer Cal a position with Thornton Capital Partners, and I'd like to discuss a different kind of partnership arrangement with Morrison Construction." Margaret's unexpected reaction transformed what should have been the destruction of Dad's business dreams into an opportunity none of us had imagined possible. Over the next hour, she outlined a proposal that addressed both our family's immediate needs and our long-term financial stability. Cal, your willingness to sacrifice your own financial security for family stability, combined with your technical skills and clear understanding of construction business operations, makes you exactly the kind of person we look for at Thornton Capital Partners, she explained. "We need someone who understands both the financial and operational sides of construction companies." The position she offered was as a junior investment analyst, starting at $95,000 annually with performance bonuses and partnership potential after 3 years. The salary increase alone would more than compensate for ending my monthly contributions to Morrison Construction. "But I don't have any formal finance experience," I protested. "You have something more valuable," Margaret replied. "You have 5 years of real-world experience keeping a construction company financially stable under challenging conditions. You understand cash flow management, operational efficiency, and risk assessment better than most business school graduates." Dad listened to the job offer with an expression of amazement and growing pride. For the first time in our conversation, he was hearing about his son's achievements from an outside perspective that recognized their true value. Margaret's proposal for Morrison Construction was equally unexpected. "Robert, I'm still interested in an investment partnership, but structured differently than we originally discussed. Thornton Capital Partners would provide a $50,000 line of credit for operational expenses plus access to our network of clients and subcontractors. In exchange, we would receive preferred status for construction services on projects we fund throughout the region." The arrangement offered Dad legitimate business growth opportunities without the unsustainable financial commitments he had originally proposed. More importantly, it acknowledged Morrison Construction's genuine strengths and potential rather than depending on artificial financial support. "Margaret, after everything I've told you about deception and financial misrepresentation, why are you still interested in working with us?" Dad asked. Her answer revealed the business wisdom that had made her successful in construction investment. "Robert, the fact that your son was willing to sacrifice his own financial future to support your business tells me more about Morrison Construction's true value than any financial statements could. Employees and investors will work hard for a paycheck. Only family will work for 5 years without recognition or compensation. Cal's faith in your business potential is the strongest endorsement I could imagine." Margaret's perspective reframed 5 years of family deception as evidence of love, commitment, and long-term thinking. Instead of viewing my contributions as fraud or artificial support, she saw them as the kind of investment that indicated genuine belief in Morrison Construction's underlying value. But Margaret had one non-negotiable requirement for any business relationship. Moving forward, all financial arrangements must be completely transparent and documented. No more family secrets, no more hidden contributions, no more assumptions about funding sources. Everyone involved in the business, including family members, needs to understand exactly where money comes from and where it goes. Dad nodded emphatically. "Margaret, I've learned more about the cost of financial deception over the past 24 hours than I ever wanted to know. Transparency isn't just a requirement for business partnership. It's necessary for maintaining family relationships." Over the following weeks, our family began implementing changes that addressed both practical financial needs and the underlying communication problems that had enabled years of deception. Emma deferred medical school as planned and found employment with a medical equipment company that provided both relevant experience and excellent benefits. Her decision to contribute to her own education costs transformed what could have been overwhelming family debt into a manageable shared responsibility. Mom returned to the workforce for the first time in 22 years, accepting an administrative position with the county courthouse that paid $32,000 annually plus health benefits. Her decision to contribute financially to the household eliminated both her dependence on others' support and her guilt about benefiting from my sacrifices. Dad began attending financial counseling sessions to address the pride and communication issues that had prevented him from seeking appropriate help during Morrison Construction's crisis 5 years earlier. The counseling helped him understand how maintaining artificial appearances had nearly destroyed both his business and his family relationships. Most importantly, we established new family financial policies that prevented future deception and ensured everyone understood our collective economic situation. Every month we held family meetings, where Dad presented Morrison Construction's financial status, Mom reported on household expenses and her employment income. Emma discussed her medical school savings progress, and I shared updates on my new career development at Thornton Capital Partners. The transparency was initially uncomfortable for all of us. Dad struggled with admitting when business challenges arose. Mom felt vulnerable discussing her transition back to paid employment. Emma worried about the financial impact of her career decisions. I had difficulty accepting recognition for my previous contributions rather than minimizing their significance. But the discomfort of financial honesty proved far less painful than the stress of maintaining deceptions. Within 6 months, our family communication had improved dramatically, and everyone felt more secure knowing they understood our actual situation rather than relying on assumptions or artificial appearances. My new position at Thornton Capital Partners exceeded every expectation. Margaret's assessment of my abilities proved accurate, and I discovered genuine talent for analyzing construction company investments. The work combined my software skills with my practical understanding of business operations, creating opportunities for career advancement I had never imagined. More importantly, the salary increase allowed me to begin rebuilding my personal financial security. For the first time in 5 years, I could afford to save money for my own future, while also contributing appropriately to family expenses. 6 months after Dad's hospitalization, I met Amanda Mitchell at a financial planning seminar Margaret had encouraged me to attend. Amanda worked as a certified public accountant for a Denver firm that specialized in small business consulting. She understood both the professional challenges and the personal rewards of helping family businesses achieve financial stability. Our relationship developed slowly, built on shared values about financial responsibility, family loyalty, and honest communication. Amanda appreciated my willingness to sacrifice for family stability while also encouraging me to pursue my own goals and dreams. Unlike Jessica, she respected my practical approach to money management and understood that true financial security came from living within your means rather than maintaining expensive appearances. 9 months after our first meeting, I proposed to Amanda with a ring I could afford comfortably without compromising anyone's financial security. The proposal took place at a family barbecue, where she had spent the afternoon talking with Mom about wedding planning and career development, and where Dad had praised her insights about business finance management. The engagement celebration represented everything our family had learned about honest communication and shared support. Instead of hiding financial constraints or maintaining false appearances, we openly discussed what kind of wedding we could afford and how each family member could contribute to making the celebration meaningful without creating economic stress. Emma completed her gap year with over $35,000 saved for medical school plus valuable work experience that strengthened her eventual application for scholarships and research assistantships. Her maturity and work ethic impressed both her employer and her family, demonstrating that taking responsibility for her education costs had enhanced rather than diminished her academic preparation. When Emma began medical school the following fall, she did so with pride in her own contributions to funding her education. The combination of her savings, improved financial aid packages, and reasonable family support created a sustainable plan that didn't require anyone to sacrifice their financial future for her dreams. Morrison Construction's partnership with Thornton Capital Partners proved successful beyond Dad's original hopes. Access to Margaret's network of clients led to 3 major commercial projects that established the company's reputation in markets it had never accessed before. Dad's genuine business skills, no longer masked by financial stress, flourished in ways that attracted both clients and industry recognition. More importantly, Dad learned to ask for help when challenges arose rather than hiding problems until they became crises. The financial counseling sessions taught him that seeking advice or assistance was evidence of responsible leadership, not personal failure. 2 years after the hospital revelation, Dad received another award from the Colorado Contractors Association this time for mentoring young entrepreneurs and promoting ethical business practices. During his acceptance speech, he publicly acknowledged the family support that had helped Morrison Construction succeed, specifically recognizing my contributions and expressing gratitude rather than embarrassment about accepting help during difficult periods. Building a successful business requires more than individual effort, he told the audience. It requires family support, community investment, and the humility to accept help when you need it. I'm grateful to my son Cal, whose faith in our company's potential provided the foundation for everything we've achieved since then. The speech represented Dad's complete transformation from someone who hid struggles to maintain pride into someone who acknowledged support to express gratitude. The audience's positive response demonstrated that vulnerability and honesty strengthened rather than weakened professional reputation. 1 year later, Amanda and I were married in a ceremony that reflected our shared values about financial responsibility and family commitment. Instead of an expensive destination wedding or elaborate reception, we chose a celebration that honored our relationship while remaining within a budget that all contributing family members could afford comfortably. Dad walked me down the aisle before the ceremony began, an unconventional reversal of traditional roles that symbolized how our family relationships had evolved through crisis and recovery. Mom and Emma served as co-matrons of honor, representing the partnership and mutual support that had replaced our previous patterns of deception and hidden sacrifice. Margaret Thornton attended the wedding as both a business partner and family friend, bringing her husband and 2 children to join the celebration. During her toast at the reception, she reflected on how honest communication and shared sacrifice could create stronger relationships than individual achievement or artificial success. Cal and Amanda's relationship represents the kind of partnership that creates lasting prosperity, she said. They understand that true wealth comes from supporting each other's goals rather than competing for individual recognition or maintaining expensive appearances. 6 months after our wedding, Amanda and I purchased our first home, a modest 3-bedroom house, in a neighborhood where we could afford the mortgage payments without compromising our other financial goals. Emma helped us move, taking a weekend break from medical school to contribute muscle and moral support to the process. Dad and Mom visited on our first Sunday in the new house, bringing tools and enthusiasm for a housewarming dinner that Amanda had prepared entirely herself. The conversation around our dining room table reflected 5 years of growth, honesty, and shared responsibility that had transformed our family relationships. Cal, I want you to know how proud I am of the man you've become, Dad said, as we finished Amanda's homemade apple pie. Not just the financial contributions you made to our family, but the integrity and wisdom you demonstrated in making those contributions. Dad, I want you to know how proud I am of the business you've built, I replied. The success of Morrison Construction belongs to you. I provided temporary financial support, but the business skills, client relationships, and industry reputation are entirely your achievements. Emma looked around the table at our family gathered in my first owned home, then raised her water glass in an impromptu toast. To learning that asking for help is not the same as admitting failure, and to discovering that supporting each other makes everyone stronger rather than making anyone weaker. We all raised our glasses, acknowledging the lesson that had emerged from 5 years of financial deception and family crisis. The most meaningful moment of the evening came when Dad presented Amanda and me with a wedding gift we hadn't expected. He handed me a leather portfolio containing legal documents that established a college fund for our future children, seeded with the first significant deposit Morrison Construction had been able to make after achieving genuine financial stability. This time, Dad said with a smile that carried both humor and deep sincerity, the family trust fund will actually contain family money contributed through honest business success rather than secret personal sacrifice. The gift represented more than financial planning for hypothetical grandchildren. It symbolized Dad's commitment to building family wealth through transparent efforts rather than hidden subsidies, and his recognition that true financial security comes from honest achievement rather than maintained appearances. As our family gathering concluded and everyone prepared to return to their respective homes and responsibilities, I reflected on how financial crisis had ultimately strengthened rather than weakened our relationships. The deception that had seemed necessary for 5 years had actually prevented the honest communication that made genuine support possible. Emma returned to medical school with renewed enthusiasm for her studies and gratitude for the family support that made her education possible. Mom continued developing her career skills and finding personal satisfaction in contributing to family financial security. Dad built Morrison Construction into a respected business that succeeded through his own abilities rather than artificial support. Amanda and I began building a marriage based on financial honesty, shared goals, and mutual support that honored both individual achievements and family commitment. Her accounting expertise and my investment experience created opportunities for helping other families navigate financial challenges with transparency and wisdom rather than pride and deception. 3 years later, as I write this story, Morrison Construction has grown into a regional construction company that employs 15 people and maintains contracts throughout the Rocky Mountain region. Dad's reputation for quality work and ethical business practices has created demand that supports genuine prosperity for our entire family. Emma graduated medical school with honors and began her residency at Denver Health Medical Center, specializing in family medicine because of her commitment to helping people maintain healthy relationships in all areas of their lives, including financial wellness. Mom advanced to a supervisory position at the courthouse and began teaching financial literacy classes for community organizations, sharing the lessons our family learned about the importance of honest communication and shared responsibility. Amanda and I started our own financial consulting practice, specializing in helping family businesses develop sustainable financial strategies that support both business success and healthy family relationships. Most importantly, we learned that true financial security doesn't come from hiding problems or maintaining appearances, but from honest communication, shared responsibility, and the willingness to ask for help when you need it. The trust fund that started this story, as evidence of my secret sacrifice, has become exactly what Dad claimed it was 5 years ago: legitimate family wealth, created through honest work and responsible financial management. But now everyone understands where the money comes from, how it's used, and why family financial decisions must be made transparently rather than secretly. The greatest lesson from our family's experience is that love sometimes requires accepting help rather than always providing it, and that genuine strength comes from honest vulnerability rather than maintained pride. When people ask me whether I regret the 5 years I spent secretly supporting Morrison Construction, my answer is always the same. I regret the deception, but I'm grateful for the opportunity to help my family succeed. The difference between regret and gratitude lies in understanding that true success requires honesty, about both achievements and assistance. Today, when my father introduces me to clients or industry colleagues, he describes me as the family member whose faith in Morrison Construction provided the foundation for everything we've built together. He's learned that acknowledging support strengthens rather than weakens his professional reputation, and that sharing credit increases rather than diminishes his own achievements. I hope this story inspires others facing family financial crises to choose honest communication over deceptive protection, shared responsibility, over hidden sacrifice, and transparent planning over artificial appearances. What would you do if you discovered your family was facing financial crisis? Would you sacrifice secretly to protect their pride? Or would you advocate for honest communication and shared solutions? Would you enable deception to maintain appearances? Or would you insist on transparency even when it meant admitting vulnerability? If this story resonated with your own family experiences or financial challenges, please share it with others who might benefit from understanding the difference between helpful support and harmful enablement. Like this video. If you believe honest communication strengthens family relationships, and subscribe to our channel for more stories about choosing integrity over appearances in difficult situations. Thank you for listening to this story about learning that true family wealth comes from love, honesty, and shared responsibility rather than hidden sacrifice and maintained pride. May your own family relationships be built on transparency and mutual support that allows everyone to thrive authentically.